it's all fine and well to say, I'm a creator, I'm going to create a course, I'm going to have a whole library of courses. That's great. You need your courses, but you have to recognize that's not what people really want. That's not what people are really buying when they're buying from you. They're buying an outcome. They're buying an outcome and they're buying an experience. Just about any topic you're teaching, and unless you're doing like original cutting edge research in artificial intelligence or something like that, has probably been covered in some way or another by somebody else, and probably multiple somebody else's at this point. So yes, your content needs to be very good. You need to know your stuff. It needs to be solid, valuable content. What's usually special, what's usually going to attract people to you and your learning experiences is you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Now, everyone is hopping onto this digital learning revolution world, but here is the catch. Not everybody knows how to teach, or at least teach in a way that creates long-lasting, meaningful change. That's because it's really hard, especially in the online world. But it is not impossible. With the right guidance, some good modeling, and honestly, a lot of humbling feedback, you can all be well on your way, because all the best learners are actually the ones that have failed the most. That is why we have invited Jeff Cobb here from Learning Revolution. He helps teach creators how to dramatically increase their reach, revenue, and impact. Today, he's going to help us answer some of these questions. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Melissa. Thanks so much for having me.
So here at the show, we really like to celebrate people's failures, because really, the whole thing is really about learning, right? So first off, what's the biggest failure you've ever experienced that's just really transformed the way that, you show up or the way that you do your business right now?
Yeah, there have been so many, and I don't know where to start. Plenty of failures. And like you said, that's often the basis for learning, coming out of those failures.
That's how we know you're an expert. Sorry. That's how we know you're an expert, because you failed a lot.
That's right. Exactly. You have to have those, scars and bruises and stuff that you've recovered from. I think one I'll mention that's pretty recent, but is really relevant here, was really a failure in creating an online course. And it was a little embarrassing, since,
we've all had one. I think we've all had one. We must have had one, right?
Yeah. But this was particularly embarrassing because it was a course we were creating, and actually a client had hired us, paid us to create this course. We're lucky we actually retained the rights to it, and it all came out well in the end, and we're going to be doing things with it. But this client wanted a course on what they were calling presenting for impact. Which is, they were a big healthcare association. They do a lot of continuing medical education. They do a lot of webinars, online conferences, and they have these subject matter experts, who show up and know about the topic that their association specializes in. But of course, most subject matter experts have never really been taught how to teach.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They know their stuff. Yeah. But it's different to actually convey your stuff in a way that's engaging and that people are actually going to learn it. So you get, if you're somebody who has to take continuing education as part of your profession, you realize there's a lot of dry, dull, boring stuff out there.
And you don't have like a degree that's motivating you all the time, right? Like sometimes because you paid so much money, you're willing to finish it. But if there isn't and it's self-serve, then.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff is just free, check the box type thing. So, to the credit of our contact at this customer, he realized this was an issue. He really wanted to up the organization's game and make sure that they were presenting more engaging, more impactful learning experiences. So we said, great, right up our alley. Of course, we can create, a course like that for you to use with your presenters, and then we'll be able to use it with our audience. So we did that. We went back to the lab at our offices and said, okay, let's pull out all our best adult learning theory and figure out how to tell everybody everything they need to know about how to teach adults well and have a big impact. And we did that. And it was supposed to be a relatively, short experience, 1 or 2 hours, crammed it all into there, got to the point where we had a script done. We were starting to shoot the stuff, and we said, we need to run this past, our contact, make sure they're good with it. And so we did, and, sent it off, and a day or two later got email back, and we could just sort of tell from the response that it wasn't quite hitting home. It really, I mean, this is a really nice guy we're working with. He knows his stuff, really well.
Yeah.
And we could tell he was just being kind of polite,
Mm.
and how he came back in his reaction to the course. And it sort of, drew us up short. And we're like, all right, he's right. This is not what we wanted to produce here. And we had spent, hours and hours, days, weeks on this, putting it together. Like I said, we're producing, ready to go with it. And we threw it all out.
That's why feedback is so important.
Yeah.
Fast feedback, fast.
Yeah, and it was a good example of that. But it was a failure. He said, what highlight a failure? We'd failed, but fortunately, we took it to heart, went back to the drawing board, and made fundamental changes to how we were teaching that material. So we were able to come back to him with something that we were proud of, that he was obviously very enthusiastic about at that point, and ultimately created this Presenting for Impact course. But we had to make a lot of changes to make it happen, and learn a lot from the experience.
What did you really take away? Well, what did you learn mainly from that big failure that's just kind of changed how you do things from now?
Yeah, it's it's a funny thing about learning. Often you're just learning and relearning and relearning and relearning things that you already know or should already know. And we knew going into this that people don't want to hear about theory. They don't necessarily care about all the theory behind adult learning. So laying all of that out for them, that's not going to help your average presenter very much. And so we were doing way too much telling, and not enough showing and demonstrating and modeling what actually needs to happen in an impactful learning experience. So, the theory is important. If you're going to teach this stuff, if you're an expert, you need to know everything that underlies it. But it needed to be underneath it. Up on top of it needed to be us really showing how to do this well and whittling it down, getting to the most essential points. I think, so many experts suffer from what's been called the curse of knowledge.
Yeah.
You know your stuff so well, and you just want everybody to know all this great stuff that you know about this topic, and it's too much.
They're just like, tell me what to do. Give me the 1, 2, 3 steps. Like, I just want a tangible outcome.
Yep.
Except for me, I always want to know the why. So I'm a trickier, different kind of a learner. I'm like a very conceptual learner. So there's that too. I think though, depending on, because we found on our side that some people, especially in like articles, they're really curious about this, like learning theories and stuff like that. And at the same time, that's what gets people really confused, because they spend so much time trying to understand that. And then being like, how do I actually implement that into a course? And it's just like, why don't you just tell me?
Yep.
And
it's, people are interested in it because it's human behavior, it's human psychology. But what we decided in the end was all that theory stuff is great. And we'll tell people where they can go and get that if they want to go deeper. So we made that a resource in the course. We told them all the things that we're drawing on. Have a ball if you want to go read all of that and really absorb it. But in terms of you just creating a great, impactful presentation for that 1 hour continuing education webinar you need to deliver, here's how to do that.
And you're gonna help us teach that, right? You got a course coming up with us who's teaching us exactly that.
We're gonna do that for Thinkific users. Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's dive in here. Let's get into the nitty gritty here. So here in the show, we really like to uncover the fluffy stuff. We really like to get down to the nitty gritty and just really look at the hard facts. What are some truths that a lot of creators commonly mistaken themselves for, right? So step one, what's the first brutal truth that you would like to share to our listeners here? All these creators out there, listen up.
Yeah. This might be a particularly hard one with this audience, but I think people know it already in their heart of hearts. And that's that nobody really wants a course. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I got to find me a course. That's what I really want to do today is take another course.
Yeah.
Most of us have had enough of that in our lives. We're not looking for courses. So, it's all fine and well to say, I'm a creator, I'm going to create a course. I'm going to have a whole library of courses. That's great. You need your courses, but you have to recognize that's not what people really want. That's not what people are really buying when they're buying from you.
What are they buying? Then what are they actually buying?
They're buying an outcome. They're buying an outcome and they're buying an experience. So they want to see positive change happen as a result of their interaction with you and with your knowledge. So if it's coming in the form of a course, fine. When they're done with that course, though, there better be a positive outcome that's been achieved. And it's that outcome that you have promised them as a result of doing that. And they want that to be a good experience, and it kind of goes back to what we're talking about, this presenting for impact course. I mean, people don't want to sit in front of a talking head flipping through PowerPoint slides, to try to have a bunch of stuff crammed into their head. That's not a good experience. So what kind of experience can you provide? If that gets packaged up in the form of a course, great. But it may be that you really need a community or coaching or some other ways to approach the experience, or a blend of different ways to do the experience. But most important of all, if they're going to engage with you, you got to give them that positive outcome that they're looking for.
I'm just going to push back on this one here. It's interesting because is it actually possible, do you think, to actually get that great transformation or outcome with a course? And I mean, yeah. I guess what we define. Thank you. Exactly. So
that's a great point, because you have to recognize, I say this all the time, that learning is not an event. Learning is a process.
Yes.
So your course is one point in that process, and it needs to be a valuable point. It needs to move the ball forward for them. That's the outcome that you can achieve, is you're moving the ball forward in a meaningful way for whoever's engaging with you. But you're not going to expect that they take your course and suddenly they're an expert in whatever it is, or they've mastered it. No, that's not going to happen. You're a catalyst for learning. You're helping that process continue and keeping them on the path to achieving the bigger outcomes that they want out of their life, their profession, whatever it is.
High five to that. Okay, we were the same. There you go, like virtual high five, because we're the same kind of, I guess, learning designers in our mind and how we think about this. Because it's not so cookie cutter when people are like,
yeah.
It's actually really interesting, because what you're talking about is the definition of a course. And people don't wake up one day being like, I want to go look at a talking head with some slides and learn this kind of thing. We use the word course, but we should really just change that and what that really means, because it's not like university days anymore, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I tend to use the word learning experience much more these days than course or coaching or consulting or anything else. For me, those are all learning experiences. So you are an architect and a facilitator of learning experiences with the people you're engaging as part of your audience.
Hot damn. I like talking to you. This is great, because we're very similar in how we approach what we think as learning and learning design. I really call it learning. I don't call myself a course creator. It's like a learning experience designer. I'm like an architect. Right. I'm a designer. I'm an artist, and I'm a scientist, right?
Right.
All in the same thing, which is amazing. Okay, so when people want an outcome and an experience, because now we're just eating ourselves here. If you say people wake up not wanting to have a course, they want an outcome and experience, and yet we are explaining that sometimes the outcome, it's just a catalyst for where you want to go. What are the kinds of experiences do you think that it's important to create those kinds of so-called move catalysts, and we would redefine as a learning experience rather than a course?
Well, I think I'm not saying, in saying that learning is not an event. It's a process. I'm not saying by that, for example, content is no longer important. Content is important. You have to have it there, but there are different ways to come at content. And too often we're focused on presenting, that content, putting the content in front of people so they absorb it. I mean, I think the essential thing is you have to have people interact with content in one way or another. And that may sometimes be, watching something on a screen and thinking about it and reflecting on it. But more often, you're asking people to take action in one way or another. So, apply it, whether it's in an exercise, whether it's in some sort of assignment that you're giving them, whether it's in a discussion that happens around it, whether you're engaging with them as more of a coach or a mentor, and having them really take the content and the concepts and think about it in the context of their own lives and work through, whether it's in work or life, wherever it is. But there's just a level of activity and interactivity and engagement around content that has to happen. And if you step back, as a course creator, as a creator in general, I did a blog post on this once. It was like 50 ways to learn or something like that. And just pretty much any action you can take in life, you can think about it from a learning perspective, So if you're trying to write something, if you're trying to reflect on something, if you're, engaging in a conversation, if you're just sitting calmly and thinking, everything you're doing has the ability to be a learning experience. And as creators of learning experiences, we need to think about that. Okay, how could people engage and interact with this content, with me, with each other, in a way that is going to create progress towards those outcomes that they're looking for?
It's I like what you said, because you said at the beginning, content is important, and then you were talking about we have to think about the people and how they learn, and that's the number one thing that people forget. They're so focused, and I mean I had this too as when I was in my early stages too. Sometimes I still forget it. You're so obsessed with the content. You're so content focused, but you should really be learner focused. And so when you focus on the people, the person learning, you're gonna be like, how's that person going to want to learn this? You have so theories or multiple intelligences. Is this person more social? Are they interpersonal? Do we need music? And then you have the ability to broaden the scope of how you might teach this, right? It's now it's like building experiences. We'll use, if it's a teenager, I was just talking to someone and they're professors. They're like professors, but a little bit older. And so they're trying to teach these teenagers, and they're getting these kids to upload onto a site and everything. And I don't think teenagers are going to download something, film something. There's too many steps. I think you should just get them to post on Instagram and tag it. I'm pretty sure they'll do that. And that's just an example of you would do that, because if you're a professor and you taught in university, everyone's going to do it for a grade. You get a bunch of other kids who have no grade and they're doing this for free. They're not going to do that. Right. Which is a really interesting point, because I've actually bought courses myself, and I do this too. I buy courses and I don't even do them. I watch them. I take all the knowledge, I get all the theory, and I don't. I have this art course where I'm supposed to do some painting, and I've watched the entire course, and I haven't lifted up the paintbrush yet. Yeah. So I think it comes up to a second brutal truth, just about motivation and actually doing things, because creating the product is one thing, creating the experience is one thing, getting people to actually go through the experience closer to get to that outcome is a completely different thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I would frame that second brutal truth as that you can't learn for your learners. Yeah. And I think particularly I do a lot of work in this sort of adult continuing education, professional development world, trade and professional associations. And I think there's this sort of ethos now that it's on the presenter, it's on the subject matter expert to basically craft a learning experience that's so perfect that the learner basically just learns it. It's they don't have to do anything. There's no effort involved. But we just know that that's not true about learning. Learning requires effort at some level. Even it can be more or less conscious, but if you're going to learn something, it is because you're engaging and doing in some way or another with whatever that something is. And so as somebody who is creating those learning experiences, whether you're calling it a course or whatever else, I mean, first of all, you have to create those opportunities for the learners to actually take action, to engage with the content, to do something meaningful with it. So make sure those opportunities are actually there. Help them see how it can apply in their own life, in their own situation. I mean, we know this, I think it's with learners of all ages, but you tend to hear it a lot about adult learners, that it has to be relevant. There has to be that what's in it for me sort of thing. And you need to help elicit that, make sure that they recognize what's in it for them. And this is something that really does not happen very often, I find. You have to provide the space for that to happen, which means, there are times when you have to pause, if you're doing something live or even if it's recorded. We try to encourage people to do this even with recordings. If you're going to say, reflect on this or do this or, take some sort of action, then you got to stop. And you got to give them time to implement that stuff. Actually do that.
Yeah.
And that can be uncomfortable, but...
I think that's it's actually really interesting that you say that. I like what you see because there's only what I'm hearing is like there's only so much you can do as a learning experience designer,
Right.
and you can do all the things given the opportunities and stuff, but you can't learn for them. That is actually the onus is on them. And like I don't know about you, but I've definitely created programs, and I just like look at the completion rate.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that dwindle, especially in your first couple of courses until you learn the knack of how to actually hack the engagement of things, communities, lives. By the way, guys, it, it's something I think we have to like tell ourselves as creators. It's just like you can do your best in this, you can learn from it, but there's no way you can pick up that pen or something and do this for your learners.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's like you were saying before too. I mean, you have to think through your particular audience, and you can't read their minds. And of course, it's not going to be a uniform audience, or different people are going to have different ways of coming at it. So you as a designer, as a creator, have to think about what are the likely scenarios in which your learners are going to engage. So like you said, I mean, if you got, teenagers out there who maybe aren't taking it for credit, that you just want them to do something, well, thinking about the fact that, yeah, they might engage with Instagram or TikTok or things like that, and trying to come up with some activities and some forms of engagement that leverage that, and being thoughtful about that, providing different forms of media so that people can engage with the content in different ways at different times. All of those things help to increase the chances that they'll be interested, that they'll get engaged initially, and that they'll stay engaged over time, that you don't get that drop-off rate, because they have different ways that they can come at it that are interesting to them and fit them as learners and as an audience.
Testing. That's all I gotta say. Like you do it the first time around and you see the drop offs, and you look at why were they dropping off.
Yeah.
And then you look, and then your next iteration, you look at it and be like, okay, well, there's a friction point. How do we ease that friction point? How do we make it fun? How do we get like several kick wins in here and stuff like that? That's how we should be looking at it. Based on all of the stuff that you have experienced in courses and people you've taught in this, how do you say you could make the students want to make the effort? Like, what have you seen work so far?
Yeah. I think, first of all, there's a lot that can be borrowed from just good marketing practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always make the point. Yeah. I always make the point that marketing and education are both about really changing behavior. They fundamentally get at that. And so if you understand what marketers do to excite interest, to excite desire, and help to implement, those sorts of tactics in your learning experiences, that's hugely helpful. And a lot of educators don't want to think that way, but it's really helpful. So, starting there, one of the best ways to do that is just with storytelling in general, because if you're able to engage people with storytelling, and then if you're able to sort of make that personal connection where they can take that story and sort of see themselves in a similar story in their own lives. So I think, weaving stories throughout whatever experience you're creating is just one of the most effective ways that there is to keep people engaged. I think another thing, I've already alluded to it, is you do have to continually ask for participation. And at times it might feel like you're doing that too much. But we're all human beings. We know how we are. If we can sort of let it kind of slide by and passively, watch or listen, we will a lot of the times. But if somebody will just stop and say, okay, take a minute and think about that and how that applies in your life, or take a minute and do this exercise, or take a minute and do this, and to make sure you're repeatedly doing that. And again, providing the pause, providing the space for people to then actually be able to do it. And then be prepared to give them some level of feedback. And that'll vary depending on the type of experience you're creating. If it's more of an on-demand experience and, may have to come through some quizzing tools. If it's a live experience, then it can be more individualized feedback. But, recognizing both what you're teaching and the level of the learners you're teaching, and providing that appropriate feedback so that they know, I got excited about this, I got engaged with this, and this person does actually care about me advancing and is going to give me meaningful feedback as a result of my engaging with it. If you're consistently doing that, then your learners are going to say, okay, this is a positive experience. It's a meaningful experience. It feels like a good, safe experience that I'm going to be available for as a learner. And that's really the root of engagement.
It's kind of, I think, like a personal trainer that you work with a personal trainer. Like, you can go to like a group training class or like your own training class, but like you don't get that level of you doing something and then a course correction with a feedback, and then you feel like you're on the right track, and then like that loop, that like learning loop is like much smaller. And like I think that's what gets people really engaged. It's if you throw your stuff out into the ether and there's no feedback on it, then you kind of so how, like, I know a lot of our people create courses at scale, so how would you recommend that at scale? How could you give feedback at scale, or what's another modality for that?
Yeah. The kind of quizzing option is certainly one of those. Building up, peer-based communities around scaled courses can work wonders as well. I mean, you need to give people some structure, some templates for how they might support each other in those more scaled experiences. You might give them question sets that they're going to use to keep themselves accountable. I mean, it may just be like you need to ask yourself these questions and sort of, see how you're responding to them. If you're responding this way, then think about this. If you're responding this way, then think about that. You can do that kind of, interaction with a learner without being there, just based on, the guidance that you're giving them. So think through that. Okay, what kind of guidance can I give that's meaningful, that's going to connect with this learner, that doesn't actually require me being in the room? And, you can usually think of easily a half a dozen ways to do that with any major point that you're trying to make or any major objective you're trying to achieve in your courses.
Yeah, I think what was the idea that I had? One was like collecting, like looking at. So what we did with our program, the Course Builder Academy, it was a cohort-based course. We just got everybody in the community to give each other feedback on top of each other, kind of like a chain reaction. And when we noticed that there was a consistent thing, because we were reviewing them, what we did in the live, and somebody could totally scale this as well, is we just took an example of somebody and gave them feedback, like live feedback. And we just saw it as a common thing. And we're like, hey, take note of these things. And then we posted into the community. And so everybody would learn from like kind of a group feedback, a feedback that the group now looks at. So there's so many ways about it. But it's exactly as you said. You just have to think about how you can do that for whatever learning experience you've designed.
Yeah, be really conscious, because you should be thinking about the objectives you're trying to achieve or help your learners achieve in any learning experience that you're creating. And so, for each major objective, just really think through, how am I going to provide feedback on this? Because I think feedback often gets...
People miss it. People miss it completely. People don't even think about that one. They're just like, here's a course, go get the survey in the end.
Yeah. And I think it's easy if you're doing an on-demand course to assume that you can't give any feedback, that all you're going to be able to do is push content out. But as we've just been discussing, there are creative ways to make sure that even helping the learner to give themselves feedback meaningfully, if you can structure that, if you can provide the guidance on how to do that, that's valuable. That's really valuable in thinking through how you do that, even with your on-demand experiences.
That's like tangible too, because it's like, do this, not that. And that's exactly what we've talked about. You can teach all the theory, but until it gets really to some tangible things that this person can see, they're not going to be feeling very motivated, because they don't have that positive result that keeps them going.
Right. Definitely.
Okay. Brutal through truth, numero 3. What's everything that what should every creator know?
Yeah. So I said earlier, the content is important. But the truth is, for most creators, your content just probably really isn't that special. And and I say that because I get contacted so often by people who want to protect their intellectual property. I'm going to put this stuff out in the world and it's going to get stolen, and somebody's going to do something with it and they're going to make all this money that I could have been making, or whatever it is. And the truth is, just about any topic you're teaching, and unless you're doing like original cutting edge research in artificial intelligence or something like that, has probably been covered in some way or another by somebody else, and probably multiple somebody else's at this point. So yes, your content needs to be very good. You need to know your stuff. It needs to be solid, valuable content. What's usually special, what's usually going to attract people to you and your learning experiences is you. It's what's unique about you, your experiences, your perspective, how you're able to frame it and position it with the particular group of people that you're going to engage with. And I would tell most creators, yes, you want your content needs to be good. It needs to be solid, but don't think that you're going to sell purely on the basis of your content. You're going to sell or encourage people to enroll, whether you're selling or not, really on the basis of you and how you're positioning it as the expert who's bringing that particular content to your audience.
What kind of tips do you have, like on that note, what kind of tips do you have for some creators to be doing that? Because a lot of people are shy. A lot of people use their content first, and some people are very camera shy. So yeah, what kind of tips would you have for these people? Because you are selling a bit of yourself.
Yeah. And as you noted or alluded to, video obviously is an asset in that if you're comfortable with video and getting on video and just being able to be forthright and honest. And there are ways of going about that, even if you aren't particularly comfortable in video, to have somebody interview you or do some things that help you be real on camera. But even if you, are not willing to get on camera, there's so many ways that we express ourselves that can, just help bring us across and how we write things and what we choose to talk about, whether it's in a social media post or on in a blog post. Even things like what the colors of our website are and the layout and then the design of our website there. If you just sit down and think about it, you can probably come up with two dozen different ways that you're expressing yourself and sort of making your presence known in the world. And then think about, okay, what are the ones you could double down on that you're comfortable with and that really help to get across who you are, and what format does that take? And choose two or three of those and really focus in on them so that you do have a way of standing out as who you are with your particular experience and your particular expertise in whatever topic it is that you're teaching.
It's kind of like tapping into branding. Like content is one thing, but branding is another thing. And it's not just like, it's not only just your colors and everything. Like those are important because that's what makes it uniquely. It's your stories. And it's, in a big way, I think it's someone's personality. I think for me, I've had people teach sales funnels, so many different kinds of teachers who teach sales funnels. And I think their content is super great, but I might not like the teacher, and then if, there's some people who I love the content and I love the teacher, and I'll focus on them more, right? I'll pay attention to a little of them more because everyone's teaching one thing. There's going to be so many people, but it's the way that you teach it differently. How can you give people the confidence to do that? Because I still think there's a lot of imposter syndrome happening here. Even though if people are experts, they don't feel like they are particularly able to be that kind of a person to speak with so much confidence.
Yeah. The first thing I like to say is a little bit of imposter syndrome is okay. I think it's a good thing. If you don't have a little bit of self-doubt, then you're probably not going to be the best teacher. But, usually it's interacting with other people who know you reasonably well, have some, idea of who you are and what you're capable of. And, getting them to provide that feedback. And I know that too can be difficult, but at some point you got to push yourself a little bit and say, okay, I want to ask people about where they think I really do shine in one way or another, or maybe where I don't, really shine. And that can come, directly asking them those questions, getting them to say that. It can come through, sort of friendly type interviewing where, they're asking you to talk about yourself and responding, and you start to pick up a lot from that. And I think the more you can, interact with people who are going to be, friendly towards you, accepting towards you, and they're helping you to elicit, what you can teach, you do start to realize, I do have something to say here. And I can say it in a way that people understand it, that people respond to it. but it's hard to get that if you're, just sort of holed up by yourself in your room or your office, just focused on your content and not really thinking about and experiencing what it's like for you to be engaging with and talking about your content in the context of somebody else responding to it. So you've got to get yourself into those contexts where you can get that kind of reaction and feedback, and certainly initially in friendly context, where you're gonna feel that confidence in doing it.
What do you think about this? I learned this from Lisa Nichols, actually. So I don't know if you know Lisa Nichols. She's a really phenomenal motivational speaker, and she was teaching about like presentation. And she says there's three kinds of speakers, and maybe you might know her. There's like an informational speaker. This is a lot of like our lecturers or our experts, and then there's a motivational, inspirational speaker. These are people who can really speak and get into your soul and like talk to your story, kind of like really rev you up. I think like Tony Robbins really fits into this kind of a category.
Right.
And then there's like a transformational speaker, and a transformational speaker can do like both the informational and the motivational. And darn, I wish I remembered. They know the theories, they know the good questions to ask. A lot of coaches know how to do this, right? How to give you that own aha moment where you figure it out and then blend that in. It's like its own mastercraft, basically. And the thing was, she was just saying, I was like, none are either better than the other. Like, not everyone can have the transformational, but you can learn those skills. But like, if you are an informational speaker, that's just who you are. That's like your teaching style, and it's okay to be that. Just know that, and know that you're going to have to engage them in like different other ways, like community or more visuals or more slides or, like more online coaching or something. So it's just like knowing what kind of you are, and then like building your experience around that.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, there's a place for the purely informational speaker. There's a place for the purely motivational speaker. There reasons that we respond to those in different situations. But I think you're right. I mean, if you are that informational speaker, like if you're a traditional sort of lecturer type, learning some of those tools, the storytelling, the ability to use, as you said, the visuals to bring in peer interactions in the context. It doesn't actually take a lot of that stuff. Just knowing about it, using it judiciously and strategically, you can take sort of a, ho-hum kind of learning experience, presentation, and really elevate it dramatically. And I think the same thing applies for the motivational speakers.
Yeah.
You need to look at, okay, what is the substance here, and how do I really, shape that substance in a way that, yes, I'm going to be very motivational, but you also want people to walk away with some things that they're going to keep and be able to use.
And do something with it.
Much better as a motivational speaker.
Yeah, it's funny because I really feel like course creators should just. I mean, I guess a lot of them are. So we have a lot of people who are creators, like YouTubers, Instagrammers, now coming into the course space because it's a way better way to scale and monetize than actual channels now, right? Then you have a group of like coaches and teachers coming into this industry as well, and they don't know the market. They don't know how to do the marketing bits. So the creators know the creative bits, but they're learning the teaching bits. And then all those teachers and experts are learning the creative bits, which is like, every video should be like its own marketing video. You should have a hook. You should create engagement right at the beginning. You should give it make it succinct and concise.
Yeah, I've observed the same thing over time. You have those sort of traditional subject matter experts that we always talk about being in the learning business, and for that group, sort of learning the more business side of it is difficult. And those who are coming from the sort of more marketing background, the learning side is more difficult. But you got to put them together and realize you're in the learning business, and you have to have both components there, and they have to work well together.
That's why I think Thinkific is not an LMS. It's not considered. It's a learning business. It's a business for learning. Business is a very important part. So actually now we've come to our moment. Actually, hold on. Before we move on to our hot seat questions here. I really want people to walk away with some great tips before they actually, so they can get a little bit of a sense of what's going to be in the course, and so they can get like a little bit zazzed up by that. What 3 tips or main takeaways could you give people to increase the impact of their courses through presentation?
The one that leaps to mind immediately is to just ruthlessly cut your content.
Kill your babies.
Kill your babies, yeah. As part of what we learned in our failure around the course, I think we crammed, way too much in there. We needed to create breathing space in there for people to actually be able to absorb what we were teaching. But also we needed to get down to the most important parts of it, the things that really were relevant to our audience. And that's so hard because we, as I was saying earlier, if you're an expert, you know your stuff, you want to teach, much more than your audience typically needs. So really, really learning to cut, I think is one of the first things. The second thing, this may be a little broad. I have to think about how to sort of dissect it down, but it goes back to like learning those lessons of marketing, So what does it mean to write a good headline, for example?
Yes.
What does it mean to get attention, to stimulate interest, to stimulate desire, and then get people to actually take action, the AIDA model. So maybe I'll boil it down to that. Like if you're an educator, you need to know that AIDA model, AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action, and absorb that into how you're actually crafting your content. It's really important. And the last one, we already spent a good bit of time on it, but I just think it's just so important to come back to is to think through the feedback opportunities and how you can execute on those feedback opportunities, no matter, how on demand, no matter how scaled the offering is. It's obviously going to change if you got a few people in a live classroom and can really interact with them versus you've got an on-demand course with, thousands of people enrolled in it. But there are good opportunities for meaningful feedback in either one of those situations and all along that spectrum. So spend a lot of time. In fact, aside from cutting your content down to what's most concise, the other place where I just spend a tremendous amount of time on any sort of course experience is crafting those good feedback opportunities.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not even just for the students. It's for you too, right? It's for you to know. It's like a gold mine. I think the more data you have, the more it's going to be a gold mine for you for your marketing, first of all, for the iteration of your course even. So it's helpful for them. But like when you look at their feedback, the feedback that's you're giving to your students for the mistakes that they make, then like these are the common mistakes people make, and then there you go. There's your blog article, Instagram post that can relate to a lot of people.
Yep,
so there's
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think that's great. So that everyone has something to look forward to when you get into the course. And you're actually going to show them and model them what that looks like.
Right.
All right. Now we are on to our hot seat questions. Don't worry, they're not too hot. Actually, it's funny because we actually we covered a little bit of this, but let's see if we can dig a little bit more. In your book, you talk about learning revolution. I would love to know where you think the next revolution of learning is going within the next decade.
Well, I say first of all that I don't think the current revolution is over. There's still, a lot kind of evolving.
What's the current revolution, just so our audiences can know because they haven't read your book?
Yeah, well, I don't want to say it's about technology because I don't want to, sort of confuse technology and learning, but it is about what technology has enabled to a large degree, what it's made possible. And that sort of covers, how it's changed life in general, how it's changed the nature of work, how we interact with each other. But then, of course, completely relevant to a company like Thinkific, what it's enabled in terms of platforms for people to be able to reach and engage with the world. I say it again and again. We're in a little town in North Carolina, Carborough. I think our population is maybe 20,000. I've got, we do have employees, but they're spread all over the place. It's just my wife and I really in the office here. And we reach thousands and thousands of people, on a daily basis. We hold online events. We teach courses. 10 years ago, that was maybe possible. 20 years ago, really not at all. I mean, there's just been a huge shift. And we're still, when I say the revolution's going on, I think we're still trying to absorb and deal with what all of this really means, and how it's impacting our lives, and our employment and everything else. So we're still in the midst of it. But, I think for me, like the two big things that are on my mind for what changes in the coming decade, and I'll say I'm probably not particularly original in thinking this, but what's going to happen with artificial intelligence in terms of, you were talking about using data earlier, the ability to process that data into feedback that can then be acted on, and you get these kind of feedback loops going that, obviously is already playing into things like, consumer products, Amazon, all that sort of stuff. When you think about that, how that can ultimately play out in learning, and individualizing and personalizing those learning experiences, really being able to connect the content and the context with the particular learner so that she is able to get those outcomes we were talking about earlier, in a way that's really going to have the highest impact for her. I think that's the promise of artificial intelligence in the world of learning. And we're still, a long ways from it really happening, but it's coming along quickly. The other big one, and it'll obviously combine with artificial intelligence and data, is where we do ultimately get to with virtual reality, and what those experiences are like. And we've talked a lot here about being able to take action, be able to do things, be able to engage. And once you start to get virtual experiences that are easily accessible, that are easy to build, to facilitate, architect, you combine a virtual environment with the power of artificial intelligence. I mean, you start to get to these like Matrix-like learning experiences where they're putting the slot into Neo's head, and he learns how to fly a helicopter.
Oh, that's exactly it. Because like if you were there and you were visually there, and they have these things where it's tactile too, like the learning's a bit tactile, so you can actually feel the impact of things, and that can't even come up with the word right now. That how that encodes in your brain is going to be so much faster, and you could just be literally like, what if you're like at sleep and they put you on hypnosis, so you're a lot more. I can't think of the word. I did not drink coffee this morning. Like the information can access your brain a lot faster, and it's just going to imprint there. And while you're sleeping, so it's interesting because what you're saying is like we're not finished with Web 2.0 yet, which is like the whole boom with this computer and where we're having right now. And then Web 3 is already on its way. It's quite weird. Yeah, that's where it's going to go. But you're right. I don't think we have even solved the Web 2.0 completely yet. There's still changes being made. Infrastructures, like we've seen the pandemic, what that's done to the technology age and the accessibility and how we work with this. Yeah, that would be really interesting to see that stretch. I'm waiting for the day that we do virtual reality to teach empathy.
There you go. Yeah. And my sort of operating theory is, and I think this sort of happened, as you're saying about the Web 2.0 thing, is suddenly we woke up at some point in our lives and everybody had a smartphone and everybody was, consuming video, and it just sort of happened. I mean, not really. I mean, it took a while for it, but there was like a tipping point that it's hard to pinpoint, but suddenly that's so ingrained in our lives. And I think that will happen with, artificial intelligence. And I think it already is happening with artificial intelligence.
It's already happening, yeah.
With virtual reality as well, that at some point we're just going to step back and realize like we're so connected. I mean,
we'll look at our smartphones and be like, this thing is archaic. This is old. And now like there's augmented reality too. It's kind of scary. I'm not going to lie. I think it's a bit scary.
It is.
Yeah. I'm part futurist, part realist in that like when Web 2.0 came out, we didn't do enough of the thinking behind the ethics and how that would be like change behavior of humans. Like just look at social media, how that's taken over. It's changed the way we communicate who we are and identify ourselves, and like going straight right into with artificial intelligence, and the people who have that data are the people who run the ads, the people who commercialize that. So you have the data. Now we have the best way to tap into you, which is virtual reality. There's no escape, right? So I feel
I
like,
mean,
yeah.
we're already seeing that, our sort of traditional leaders, our traditional governmental political structures they haven't caught up,
No.
and yet we're, still going full speed ahead into the future. So yeah, I think we're in for some, amazing times, but also potentially disastrous times.
I hope we learn from the past. I hope we get ahead of ourselves in the future of knowing, like, we're building amazing tools, but if we do not level up people's awareness of those tools, we're not doing humanity, like, we're not helping humanity. Basically,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, so we could have easily gone down a tangent on that question, but looping back here, what would you say? Okay, and we did touch on this before, but I would love to see your answer for, like, the number one thing. What is the number one best thing to actually create long-lasting transformation? Now, I'm not going to say within a course. It can be any experience. Like, what would be the best way for long-lasting transformation in any given experience that you've seen?
Best way for long lasting transformation. And are you saying from the standpoint of somebody who's trying to create an experience, or the learner in the experience? Or
I would say, because we're talking to the creators, how would a creator go about doing it? And I think,
yeah, I mean,
the creator would have to think about the learner as well, too, right? So
right.
That answer would answer both, because you'd have to think about how do people learn, and how do people transform, basically.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about learning is not an event; it's a process.
Yes.
So if you're a creator, how are you architecting a long-term process for your learner? Because you're going to have them for that, let's say it's an hour that they're in your course, or even if you have them for a semester, if you're at a college or whatever, eventually they're done with you. They're moving on out into the world with whatever you've taught them. So how are you giving them tools that they can carry with them to continue that experience? And in the Presenting for Impact course, the final segment of that course is called Framing the Future. So, in the context of the course, the experience that you're teaching, facilitating, actively engaging them and thinking beyond the experience while they're in the experience. So, they should be thinking about, how am I going to take this back and apply it, whether it's in work or home life or whatever it is. But then also giving them some tools for doing that. And, that's traditional things like, templates and checklists that they can take out. It's things like, getting them while they're sitting there with you to schedule on their calendar every month or every 6 months or whatever, something they're going to do that relates back to what, you've taught them in the course. It's helping them connect with accountability partners within the context of the course, so they have a fellow traveler as they're going along. So it's kind of like, when you think through the feedback that you can help to structure for your students, also think about how you're going to frame that future for them. What are you going to give them that's going to help them take this out into the world and continue to apply it, continue to reflect on it, and continue to grow and evolve relative to whatever that core content was that you were helping them work with.
Yeah, and it's funny, because in marketing they call it future pacing. It's a tactic, and learning it helps, and it works because it's really just working on your brain and your own biases. And I think when we go into the future and we get people to think of your, what your future life is about, it's also really just shaping your identity of, like, who do you want to be, right? Like, this is who you are now, and a real transformation is like, when you're doing all this stuff, the process of getting there is, who do you want to be? And remember, who do you want to be? And that's who you'll become, because just like life, you have moments where you don't know anything. And then you have this aha, you wake up one day, you're doing the task, and you're like, whoa, I'm different. I would identify myself as an expert now, or a pro, an amateur. Like, you move out of beginner into amateur, and you're like, I'm an amateur now. And that's like its own identity, right?
Yeah. No, and I think identity is such an important thing that I don't think really gets talked about enough in the context of learning. It's like how you see yourself, what you believe about yourself, being mindful, being conscious of that process of transformation you're going through, and marking those moments when you do see the change, hopefully for the better, but even if you see it for the worse, to mark that and then to be conscious about where you're going to go from there and who that makes you now.
It's like milestones. Yeah, that's kind of how I see transformation, at least. And I think that's what happens when we forget. We spend too much time on the content and really don't look at the person and what their journey is going to be like, and the experience is going to help them along that journey towards that transformation. Which is like, I always say this: like, they could be on this path, but all you needed to do is have a course or an experience that takes them on like this much of a path. And over time, you've done something that puts them on a completely different trajectory, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Amazing. Okay, last question here. If you could go back and talk to yourself at the start of all of this journey, what advice would you give yourself?
Boy, that's a tough one. I think there's probably something in there about just being a little more patient and realizing, because we're talking about change, transformation, learning, things really creating a difference in your life. And I mean, that takes time. It takes effort. It takes where we started, failure. I'm certainly, and I don't think this is uncommon at all. It's certainly somebody who can beat up on themselves a little bit about not being, where you wanted to be or having that identity that you wanted to have. And being able to step back. I've become such a big advocate over time of, both mindfulness and reflection. I think we don't do meaningful reflection enough where we really step back and we're objective, we're compassionate with ourselves. We look at what happened, and can find the good and the bad in it and the learning opportunities in it. But that takes, it takes some discipline, but also takes a level of maturity, and it takes some patience. And if I could have somehow had all of that 25 years ago, it would be fantastic.
It's like the root of learning. We're always constantly learning and unlearning about ourselves, and that's like the first piece. And so if you're not reflecting on your own life, how are you really learning about yourself and where you want to go and the outcomes that you want? Oh, twist back, it's all loops around. Oh my goodness. So thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing with us all your wealth of knowledge and all the great tips that you have.
Thank you, Melissa. It's been fantastic. Enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, this is great. I can't wait to check out your course when it comes out. Everybody who is watching this, if this really interests you and you like it, check down below for the course link. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to watch more, subscribe to us. And we will see you next week in the next episode. Bye now.